Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first question is for you, Secretary Leaf. Professor Alan Dershowitz recently talked about a Hamas strategy that he referred to as the CNN strategy, or what others have labeled the dead baby strategy. The basic concept is that Hamas attacks Israel in a manner that it knows will draw a military response. Then in a strategy that can only be described as barbaric and cowardly, Hamas retreats into its strongholds, as we've been discussing, and uses Palestinian civilians as human shields. Not that Hamas has any regard for the law of war, or are there any other rules for that matter, but engaging in disgusting acts such as this is a complete and utter violation of the law of armed conflict. Israel does its best, I think, to avoid civilian casualties, and in this conflict gave civilians time to depart from northern Gaza, an act which Hamas reportedly attempted to block. And I heard earlier today that there was also things that just millions of flyers were dropped all over northern Gaza. They made thousands and thousands of phone calls to evacuate people before anything happened. So I think they're doing their best to avoid this. But eventually there are civilian casualties with this setup. Hamas then blames Israel as the guilty party, claiming that they are willingly killing innocent civilians. The success of this CNN strategy depends on the mainstream media, and unfortunately, perhaps members of Congress, as we recently heard here with the ambulance comment, which anyone who knew of the ambulance story certainly knew that it was filled with Hamas fighters, because every story I saw on every channel, they were grouped together. So anyways, but it relies on them buying into this narrative and allowing itself to be used as a tool of Hamas. So Secretary Leaf, I was just wondering, what efforts, if any, is the administration undertaking to ensure that Hamas in their CNN strategy is ineffective? Specifically, what is the administration doing to push back on Hamas' false narrative and to show American people in the world that Israel has an inherent right to self-defense, that Israel's current operation is on solid legal footing, and that Hamas is the one that is violating the law of war in numerous ways? What are we doing to stop this spread of this misinformation?
Thank you, Congressman. You know, the point of Hamas's operations is terror, full stop, and they are masters at propaganda, as you note. The good news is that most governments around the region well recognize what kind of entity that that we're dealing with. The publics are inflamed. There's no question. The publics are inflamed by images of mounting casualties, and that's an issue across the region. We are on a constant tempo of direct engagement discussions, public affairs efforts to really set the record straight. But it is quite a challenging environment for just the reasons you cite.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Probably doing your best you can, but I think it's going to be more important as time goes on to up that game a little bit, because as this war goes on, that narrative is just going to grow and grow. Ms. Stroll, my next question is for you. The Biden administration recently presented testimony before this committee explicitly asking that Congress not include Iranian-backed proxies in a new authorized use of military force that we're considering. Since, as you noted in your opening statement, Iran-backed proxies in Iraq and Syria have launched at least 41 attacks on U.S. service members, while Hamas and Hezbollah continue to attack our friend and our ally Israel on a daily basis. Given the increased threat posed by Iranian-backed groups and proxies, has this administration's position on whether to include Iran-backed groups and proxies in a new AUMF changed?
Thank you for your question, Congressman. The position of this administration has not changed. Our self-defense strikes against Iran-backed militia groups have the underpinning of the President's Article 2 authority under the Constitution.
Okay. I guess that's a question for a later day. I would think that if we're going to include other groups, that maybe this would be one of the ones that we'd want to include as well, despite what you stated there, since they seem to be one of our biggest threats right now. But Secretary Stroll, given, this is my last question, given the chaos on the ground, the entrenchment of Hamas among the Palestinian people, and Hamas's history of misappropriating aid intended for civilian populations, what realistic and meaningful guardrails are being employed by the Biden administration to prevent Hamas from obtaining the food, the water, the medicine, and the other humanitarian aid that is intended for civilians?
I'd be happy to take that one, Congressman. So to date, we have not seen evidence that they have diverted that aid. It is something that is something that we are monitoring. There's obviously, you know, it's quite a difficult security environment on the other side in Gaza where aid goes in and where aid workers are working, but we are doing our best.
Thank you. I appreciate that.